In just 47 seconds, $847 billion in EU recovery funds would become the weapon that destroyed a career. Ursula von der Leyen didn't expect the ambush. She certainly didn't expect it from Alice Weidel, the sharp-tongued economist who had spent months preparing this moment with Germanic precision. The cameras were rolling live across every major European network when the most powerful woman in Brussels walked directly into a trap that had been months in the making. What I witnessed next wasn't just political theater, it was a public execution, broadcast in real time to 450 million Europeans. I was positioned in the press gallery of the European Parliament in Strasbourg, notebook ready, expecting another routine session on the 2024-2025 budget review. The vast hemicycle stretched below me, its curved rows of blue seats filling slowly with delegates checking phones and shuffling through briefing papers. The atmosphere felt standard, almost boring, punctuated only by the gentle hum of the simultaneous translation systems. Von der Leyen approached the podium with her usual confidence, the navy blue suit perfectly tailored, her silver hair swept back in its trademark style, the controlled posture of someone who had delivered thousands of speeches to rooms just like this one. She carried a single folder marked Recovery Framework, Final Assessment, her stride measured and deliberate across the polished floor. But Alice Weidel wasn't in her usual seat. The co-leader of Alternative for Germany had positioned herself in the front row, directly in von der Leyen's eye line, a strategic placement that immediately caught my attention. She sat with military precision, her posture ramrod straight, a thick black leather portfolio balanced precisely on her lap, her blonde hair pulled back severely into a tight chignon that emphasized the angular lines of her face. I noticed she wasn't taking notes like the other MEPs around her. She wasn't even looking at the agenda. She was watching von der Leyen with the focused intensity of a predator studying its prey. Waiting. Planning. Von der Leyen began with her standard opening about European solidarity and shared prosperity. The translation booths were humming quietly. Most delegates were checking their phones or reviewing documents. It felt like any other Tuesday in the EU's legislative machinery. Then, at exactly 10:43 a.m., everything changed. "Madame President," Weidel's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. She hadn't raised her hand. She hadn't waited for recognition. She simply stood up and spoke with the kind of authority that stops conversations mid-sentence. Von der Leyen paused, clearly irritated by the interruption. The distinguished member from Germany will have an opportunity to speak during the designated question period. But Weidel was already opening her portfolio with deliberate theatrical precision. The leather creaked audibly in the silence as she withdrew a document. I believe the chamber deserves to hear about this immediately. She held up a document, and even from the press gallery, I could see it was thick, substantial, covered in official EU letterhead and marked with multiple red confidential stamps. The pages rustled as she lifted them higher, ensuring every camera in the room could capture the moment. Several delegates in the front rows were craning their necks, trying to see what she was holding. The temperature in the room shifted instantly. Von der Leyen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The murmur from the delegates died completely. "This is a leaked internal audit from the European Court of Auditors," Weidel announced, her voice carrying perfectly in the now silent chamber. Document reference ECA 2024-847 urgent. It details what can only be described as systematic financial mismanagement of the Next Generation EU Recovery Fund. My pen was moving frantically across the page. This wasn't in any briefing. The press office hadn't mentioned any leaked audits. Von der Leyen's fingers had gone white where she gripped the podium. "The German member is out of order," von der Leyen stated, but there was something in her voice now, a tremor, uncertainty. Weidel ignored the rebuke completely. According to this audit, $23.7 billion allocated for green energy infrastructure was redirected through a series of subsidiary organizations without proper parliamentary oversight. The trail leads to consulting firms with direct ties to Commission staff. The chamber erupted, not in applause or boos, but in the kind of chaos that happens when 705 people suddenly realize they're witnessing something historic. Delegates were shouting questions in 6 different languages. The President of Parliament was banging his gavel frantically, trying to restore order. But Weidel wasn't finished. She opened the portfolio again and produced a second document. This one looked different, newer, more official. Furthermore, she continued, somehow making herself heard over the din, this morning at 8:15 a.m., the German Federal Ministry of Finance received a formal complaint from the European Public Prosecutor's Office requesting all correspondence between the Commission and McKinsey Global Institute regarding project implementation in Eastern Europe. I watched von der Leyen's face in that moment, and I will never forget what I saw. For just an instant, the mask slipped completely. Not confusion, not anger, terror. She leaned into her microphone, and when she spoke, her voice had lost all its usual authority. These allegations are based on incomplete information and taken completely out of context. It was the wrong response. In rooms like this, you deny or you deflect. You never, ever admit that allegations might be based on any information at all. Weidel pounced immediately. Incomplete? Madam President, shall I read the email chain between your Chief of Staff and Alexander Petrov regarding the Bulgarian wind farm contracts? The timestamps match perfectly with the fund transfers. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the translators had stopped. Von der Leyen was trapped, and everyone in the chamber knew it. If she denied it, Weidel would produce more evidence. If she admitted it, her career was over. She chose a third option. She gathered her papers, nodded curtly to the President of Parliament, and walked out. Not a word of explanation, not a promise to address the allegations later, just a complete humiliating retreat in front of 700 elected officials and a live television audience of millions. The press gallery erupted in organized chaos. Reporters were shouting questions at empty air, frantically typing on laptops, trying to reach sources in the commission. My editor was already texting, demanding to know what the hell was happening. But down on the chamber floor, Alice Weidel remained standing at her seat, portfolio still open, watching von der Leyen's retreating figure with what I can only describe as satisfaction. She had just done something that opposition politicians across Europe had been trying to do for years. She had publicly humiliated the most powerful woman in European politics, and she had done it with documents, evidence, and perfect timing. The President of Parliament suspended the session immediately. As delegates filed out in confused clusters, I could hear fragments of conversation in German, French, Italian, all asking the same question. What happens now? Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with alerts from every news service across Europe. Or von der Leyen exit was already trending on Twitter, accumulating thousands of retweets and comments in 6 different languages. The Brussels press corps was in full panic mode, reporters frantically dialing sources, trying to get statements from Commission spokespeople who had suddenly become completely unreachable. European stock markets were reacting nervously to the breaking news of potential high-level corruption, with the Euro Stoxx 50 dropping 1.3% in the first 30 minutes after Weidel's revelation. Financial networks were running emergency segments, their anchors struggling to explain the implications of what they had just witnessed live. But the most telling detail came later that afternoon. The Commission's daily press briefing, scheduled for 3 p.m., was canceled without explanation. The backup briefer wasn't available either. By 5 p.m., it became clear that the entire leadership structure of the European Commission had essentially gone dark. Alice Weidel, meanwhile, spent the afternoon giving interviews to every major European news outlet, calmly presenting additional documents and promising more revelations in the coming days. She had transformed from a fringe opposition figure to the person asking the questions that the entire continent wanted answered. What I witnessed in Strasbourg wasn't just a political confrontation. It was a masterclass in preparation, timing, and execution. Weidel had done her homework, chosen her moment, and struck with surgical precision. Von der Leyen, for all her experience and institutional knowledge, had been caught completely off guard. The real question isn't whether the allegations are true. The real question is why the most powerful woman in European politics ran away instead of fighting back. In a system built on debate, discussion, and democratic accountability, silence is the most damaging response possible. As I write this, 6 hours after that extraordinary moment in Strasbourg, the European Commission has still not issued any statement regarding the allegations. Von der Leyen's office has not responded to repeated requests for comment. The longer the silence continues, the more devastating it becomes. Alice Weidel may represent a political movement that many Europeans reject, but today she accomplished something that transcends partisan politics. She forced accountability on a system that rarely faces real scrutiny. Whether you agree with her politics or not, you have to respect the effectiveness of her strategy. The woman who walked out of the European Parliament this morning is not the same woman who walked in. Her authority has been fundamentally undermined, her reputation damaged, possibly beyond repair. In the world of high-stakes European politics, perception is everything, and the perception now is clear. Ursula von der Leyen couldn't answer the questions when they mattered most. The Recovery Fund allegations will be investigated. The truth will eventually emerge, but the image of the Commission president gathering her papers and fleeing in silence will be remembered long after the audits are complete. That's the price of being embarrassed on the world stage. In politics, some humiliations are simply unrecoverable.